Welcome back to your Orca Camp Vancouver Island podcast. I'm your Orca pal Sandra, and today I'd like to dive into a couple topics that keep cruising the internet, and I feel it's worth the time. Now, let me start by saying this. There's a moment out here in Orca territory when everything suddenly goes quiet. The radios stop crackling, the coffee stops pouring, and even the birds seem to pause. And then you hear it, the slow breath of a killer whale rising through the fog. Most people think they're simply looking at an animal. But what if they're looking at something much more complex? What if killer whales aren't just intelligent? What if they have culture? Not instinct, not survival behavior, but actual culture, like traditions, languages, dialects, family rules, social custom passed down for generations. And the deeper scientists look into the world of the killer whales, the more it begins to resemble something astonishingly familiar. Us, humans. Welcome to Orca Camp Vancouver Island. The family that never breaks. One of the most remarkable things about the northern resident killer whales is that sons never truly leave home. Imagine that for a moment. A 6-ton apex predator, a male with a dorsal fin nearly 6 feet tall, still traveling beside his mother into adulthood for life. In the northern resident Orca community here on the coast of Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada, family is everything. These whales live in metro lines, in tight-knit families, a grandmother, her daughters, her sons, and eventually their calves. Generations after generations staying together. Not for a few years, for decades, for life. Scientists have discovered that older female orcas, the matriarchs, carry incredible important knowledge. They remember salmon migration routes, danger zones, seasonal feeding patterns, and safe travel corridors, especially during difficult years when salmon are rare. The survival of the pod often depends on the memory of the older females, the mothers and the grandmothers. And here's something even more incredible. Mothers continue sharing food with their adult children, not just the sons. Even when those sons are fully grown, she still shares her food. And the kind of lifelong maternal bond is extraordinarily rare in nature. This isn't just biology anymore. This is social structure. And as I like to say, this is culture. Orcas have their own languages as well as their own dialects within their pods, within their clans. Now imagine this. You're sitting near the shoreline at camp late in the evening, fog drifts across the water, and beneath the surface the whales are talking. Every orca pod has its own dialect, and I'm sure you've heard it with some hydrophones, either online or even in person. And there are marine biologists who can actually recognize the vocal languages between the individual orcas. Distinct calls passed down from generation to generation, almost like, family accents. Researchers can actually identify which pod is nearby simply by listening to their calls underwater. Think about it, how extraordinary that is. Different communities of killer whales communicate differently, not because of genetics, but because they learn it from one another. Culture, again, a young calf learns the sounds of its family the same way a child learns language from its parents, and those dialects can survive for decades. We know that. Maybe even centuries. Some scientists now believe these vocal traditions help strengthen family identity and social bonds within the pods, meaning killer whales may not simply recognize each other visually, they may recognize each other culturally, and that over a vast amount of space. Now, let's say traditions of the ocean, of the most mysterious behaviors of the northern resident orcas is something called beach rubbing, especially in the summertime. Along certain rocky beaches along the Vancouver Island coast, entire pods slowly swim into shallow waters and rub their bellies against smooth stones beneath surface. Scientists still don't fully understand why they do it, but it might be as simple as exfoliation, maybe a way of communication, social bonding, tradition. But what's fascinating to me is this: not all orcas in the world do that. Only certain orca species, like the northern resident orcas. And calves learn again from their mothers and their grandmothers. And in some of the videos, you can see the orca babies just coming right up at the beach, pretty close. I mean, that means these traditions are culture inherited, passed down, they're taught, and they're protected by their families. Some orca families also specialize in specific hunting techniques for different prey, different behaviors, different lifestyles. Resident orcas eat mostly salmon, preferably Chinook, and transient orcas hunt marine mammals such as sea lions, seals, other dolphins, and other whales. Offshore orcas behave also very different again. Different diets, different social structures, different communication styles. Almost like entirely different societies within the same species. Now, let's talk about, do orcas have emotions? Like the emotional intelligence of orcas, and maybe the most powerful part of this is realizing these whales aren't just intelligent, they're deeply emotional. And we look at past behaviors. Researchers have observed grieving behaviors, protective parenting, playfulness, patience, even what appears to be teaching adult orcas slowing down for calves, pods supporting injured members or birthing mothers, and as we all remember back in 2018, where a mother from the southern resident killer whales carried her dead calf for a long time, for many miles. And suddenly the world killer whale feels incredibly incomplete because there's nothing more monstrous about them. In many ways, their world is built around connection, family, memory, community. But of course, do they hunt for prey to feed themselves and families? Of course they do. And maybe that's why people feel something so overwhelming when they encounter them in the wild and actually see them. It's not just an awe, it's recognition. Somewhere deep down, we see pieces of ourselves in them. My dear Orca community, what social media doesn't show you is social media often shows orcas exploding from the water beside boats, perfect drone footage, close encounters. But the real experience, it's much quieter. There's so much more space in between sightings. It's so much slower, more respectful. Sometimes you wait hours on a regular boat tour, and sometimes in camp you wait days for a sighting, and sometimes all you get is a distant dorsal fin disappearing into the mist, and that's all you get in 4 days or an entire week. And somehow that can become one of the most meaningful vacations you've been on, because the experience becomes real, not a performance and not entertainment. It's like a privilege. Out here in Orca territory, the whales owe us nothing, and maybe that's exactly what makes the encounter sacred. Dear friends, it's time to wrap it up for today. I'd like to finish by saying this: the more we learn about orcas, the harder it becomes to call them killer whales, and the harder it becomes to see them as simple wildlife. These are beings with memory, with family, and with traditions, with a language and dialect within each family group that create their own culture. And maybe one of the greatest lessons they offer us is that survival was never only about strength. It was about connection. Thanks everyone. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here, and thank you for joining me on today's Orca Camp Vancouver Island podcast.